623, 20 November 2020. This is the low intensity conflict INSOM from FortObserver.com. Anti-fascists to rally in Atlanta. Atlanta anti-fascists, the Party for Socialism Liberation, PSL, and Metro Atlanta Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, are organizing racists out of ATL for Saturday. Observers note, the potential for political violence, as we witnessed in Washington, D.C. last weekend, is high. Leftists launch counterintelligence campaign against right-wing groups. Far-left groups are developing a counterintelligence operation against right-wing groups in order to disrupt organizing efforts. The strategy consists of intelligence gathering, disrupting recruiting pipelines, and fomenting rifts between groups and members. They will primarily focus their efforts through social media platforms such as Facebook. Observers note, these plans are quite detailed and thorough. Interestingly, activists plan to use a bevy of fake accounts of various perceived levels of radicalization to influence groups differently. An effective counterintelligence effort represents a significant development from their usual doxing campaigns to an offensive intelligence support network. And remember, they're getting help from former military because they've been recruiting and former military has been stepping up. Upcoming event calendar. 20 November. This is still relevant. Trans Day of Vengeance in Los Angeles, California. 21 November, Proud Boys Rally, Sacramento, California. 21 November, Racists Out of ATL, Antifa, PSL, Atlanta, Georgia. 21 November, No More Pigs from the They Them Collective, Washington, D.C. 22 November, ACAB March, Baltimore Liberation Front and Maryland Youth Liberation Front, Baltimore, Maryland. 23 to 29 November, Indigenous Resistance Coast to Coast, multiple cities. 7 December, No More Pigs, the They Them Collective, Washington, D.C. And 12 December, March for Trump, Washington, D.C. And that's it that I have from FortObserver.com. Again, I highly encourage everyone to subscribe to their notifications. It's well worth it. So, something I came across that I thought I'd share. What is the Great Reset? This is an article from Zero Hedge. The internet sure has been buzzing about the Great Reset lately. The term has been trending on Facebook and Twitter, and the New York Times even published an article dismissing it as a conspiracy theory, but it is definitely no conspiracy theory. The author was determined to get to the bottom of this whole thing, and he's going to share the facts that the New York Times either could not find or refused to share. It turns out that the Great Reset is actually an initiative that was started by the World Economic Forum that is designed to get, quote, global stakeholders to cooperate in simultaneously managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, end quote. The following comes directly from the official website of the World Economic Forum. Okay, this is from that site. There is an urgent need for global stakeholders to cooperate in simultaneously managing the direct consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. To improve the state of the World Economic Forum is starting the Great Reset Initiative. According to the World Economic Forum, the Great Reset is a quote, unique window of opportunity, end quote, for global leaders to shape, quote, the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, and the nature of business models and the management of a global commons, end quote. From the article, as we enter a unique window of opportunity to shape the recovery, this initiative will offer insights to help inform all those determining the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, and the nature of business models and the management of the global commons, drawing from the vision and the vast expertise of the leaders engaged across the forum's communities. The Great Reset Initiative has a set of dimensions to build a new social contract that honors the dignity of every human being. So the man behind the Great Reset is named Klaus Schwab. He is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and elsewhere on the official site of the World Economic Forum, there is an article by Schwab entitled, "Now is the Time for the Great Reset." The following is an excerpt from that article. To achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism. He is very open about the fact that he wants to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies. That means that all aspects of human activity would fall under his plan. But in particular, he wants a great reset of capitalism. When people start talking about, dramatic changes to capitalism, usually what they mean is that we should move even more in the direction of socialism. According to Schwab, there are three main components of the Great Reset. The first involves reforming our economic system so that they will, quote, promote more equitable outcomes. Where did we hear that from recently? Very recently, like within the last 2 weeks. Moreover, government should implement long overdue reforms that promote more equitable outcomes. Depending on the country, these may include changes to wealth taxes, the withdrawal of fossil fuel subsidies, and new rules governing intellectual property, trade, and competition. Unfortunately, I think that he means the exact same thing that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez means when she talks about more equitable outcomes. Secondly, Schwab says one of the main components of the Great Reset would involve massive government investments in green urban infrastructure and other similar projects. The second component of a great, this is from Schwab, the second component of a Great Reset agenda would ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability. Here, the large-scale spending programs that many governments are implementing represent a major opportunity for progress. The European Commission, for one, has unveiled plans for a 750 billion euro or $826 billion recovery fund. The US, China, and Japan also have ambitious economic stimulus plans. Rather than using these funds as well as investments from private entities and pension funds to fill cracks in the old system, we should use them to create a new one that's more resilient, equitable, and sustainable in the long run. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance metrics. Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to read that again. Rather than using these funds, as well as investments from private entities and pension funds, to fill cracks in the old system, we should use them to create a new one that is more resilient, equitable, and sustainable in the long run. This means, for example, building green urban infrastructure and creating incentives for industries to improve their track record on environmental, social, and governance metrics. Doesn't that sound a whole lot like the Green New Deal that many on the left have been pushing here in the United States? Thirdly, Schwab envisions applying the innovations that we have witnessed during the COVID pandemic as a model for every sector of society. From the article, the third and final priority of the Great Reset agenda is to harness the innovations of the Fourth Industrial Revolution to support the public good, especially by addressing health and social challenges. During the COVID-19 crisis, companies, universities, and others have joined forces to develop diagnostics, therapeutics, and possible vaccines, establishing testing centers, create mechanisms for tracing infections, and deliver telemedicine. Imagine what could be possible if similar concerted efforts were made in every sector. In other words, Schwab thinks that the global response to the COVID pandemic can be a blueprint for governing every area of our lives moving forward. Of course, in order for the globalists to get the United States on board with this Great Reset, they will need to get Donald Trump out of the way first, and they think they're very close to achieving that goal. The globalists envision a sustainable future in which all forms of activity are very closely monitored and controlled for, quote, the good of the planet, end quote. They are entirely convinced that a global system in which all nations of the world are increasingly integrated is what is best for humanity. But those of us that are resisting the globalists understand that a one-world system will inevitably evolve into a complete and utter global nightmare. Globalist publications such as the New York Times will continue to try to convince all of us that plans such as the Great Reset do not even exist, even as globalist organizations such as the World Economic Forum are publicly announcing their plans right out in the open. In times like these, it is absolutely imperative to think for yourself, because deception is everywhere, and those that tell the truth are often greatly ridiculed. 623 out.